Dear anxiety, a couple of years ago, I had no idea that you existed. I posted a video about my accident 11 years ago and I talked about the demons I'm still fighting. Those demons manifested themselves years after my accident. I'm still learning how to handle you, but you seem to appear out of nowhere, especially in times of unrest. But what exactly are you? And why do I have to struggle with you?
Anxiety is a very common reaction towards potentially life-threatening situations or other stressful events. It acts as an alarming system because, if something would happen, you're alert, you're there, and you can potentially avoid a life-threatening situation. I remember when I was at school and at university, like before tests or exams, I was very stressed and I had to go to the toilet like a lot. That was like a side effect of, at least in my case, of anxiety. When I speak of anxiety, I speak of anxiety disorder, which is a mental health problem or issue. That happens when anxiety becomes so uncontrollable or unbearable that you can't live your life normally anymore. There are a lot of different anxiety disorders like social anxiety, health anxiety, social gathering, relationship anxiety. I'm not a doctor and I'm not an expert. So if you experience any symptoms, please go to your doctor and talk to them and rule out any other underlying disease or problems. I'm suffering from health anxiety, also known as hypochondria. I personally don't like the term hypochondria because simply how and what people believe it is and can mean, and also how some shows and movies portray the anxiety disorder. Therefore, I refer to my anxiety disorder health anxiety. I like to call it health anxiety because that's how it feels to me and that's how I can pin it down, so to say. A couple of years ago, I think it was 2016, end of 2016, start of 2017, I had this underlying PTSD that I never really addressed because it never was so prominent. And back then I was starting my master's degree and I was under a lot of stress. My then girlfriend and now wife was living overseas and we had this long distance relationship which was stressful on its own. Late November, December, I noticed that my lower backs hurt like extreme and I couldn't do anything anymore. Sitting hurt, moving hurt. I didn't do anything for the first part of time, so I was just trying to not work out as much and move as much, and it didn't get better. And on top of that, then I got the flu. So my PTSD and my fear of dying or having something serious kicked in. So this fear of life changing from one moment to the other, and I think a lot of people can relate to that, was manifesting itself, and I convinced myself of being severely sick or having cancer or something like that. And it was not a good time. Of course, I went to the doctor and I got an MRI done. And yeah, it turned out that a disc in my lower spine slipped. That was causing the pain. A few days after, my brain tried to convince me that the doctor missed something, and the pain didn't stop, obviously, because it's a slow process. And for a month, I was convinced that I had something more than that until the pain finally stopped in summer of 2017, and I thought that was it. But yeah, life is not always that easy. Yet this concern for my health and the pattern and the cycle of thought, intrusive thinking and everything was still there. I was able to manage the whole situation a little bit through CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and I overcame the first wave of my health anxiety, but my stress was still on a very high level and I wasn't eating as healthy and I wasn't working out, and I went down again in the rabbit hole, and this time it was more focused on my stomach. And the thoughts came back like super fast this time again. But the stress was constant and my level of self-care was non-existent at that time. And this time my stomach was my main focus area. And I remember waking up with stomach pains every day. I had diarrhea, I had constipation, I had the worst pain. And I convinced myself again that I had something serious, and I went to a lot of doctors and I got a lot of testing done, but it came out fine. And my doctor said it's probably IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, which it was. But I had to convince myself that I was not sick. I was so focused on my body all the time that this vicious cycle continued, and it got worse. My physical symptoms got worse because I focused so much on them. And going to the doctor brought like a short relief. Like I was fine 2-3 days, but then it started again because my head was like, oh, maybe he missed something, or I didn't talk about that specifically, or stuff like that, you know? The feeling intensified again. I was trapped in this cycle of constantly body checking and body scanning and being so aware, and all the adrenaline and cortisol that were pumped into my body intensified the whole situation for me. There were periods during the day I was fine, but then at night, for example, or in the morning, it was just hell. I woke up with a massive stomach ache every day for weeks, and I had this feeling that there was something really, really wrong with me. There were so many symptoms like going to the toilet constantly, diarrhea, stomach aches, aches in like the body and joints, dehydration, headaches, going to the toilet, like peeing a lot. But it took me over a year to finally realize that what was happening to me was anxiety. After a year, I finally gained the confidence to call it what it is, to call it health anxiety, to call it something that is keeping me from living, essentially. With therapy and CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, I finally gained back a little bit of control of my life, and it felt so good. But the fact that anxiety comes in waves was not easy to accept, because there were weeks where I was fine and I was moving towards my goal of finally getting a hold of this crippling fear, this constant fear. And then anxiety came full on back, and I felt thrown back the whole way, and I felt like I had to start it all again, which was not true, but that's how it felt like at first. It took me a while to realize that anxiety doesn't just disappear. You know, you learn a lot of things, tools, ways to cope with it, especially when it comes back hitting you hard after you maybe had a stressful week at work or something, or a stressful life event with COVID, for example, where something is completely out of control. And yeah, that's something I had to accept and learn, that I won't get rid of anxiety that fast. So at the end of 2019, I was basically anxiety-free, or the symptoms were basically gone, and I felt super good. And then the pandemic hit, and I was like, oh wow, I'm actually surprised that I'm not really affected by the whole situation. But then in 2021, like in summer, it hit me again. And I'm still dealing with that. Yeah, you know, I was fine, I was feeling great, and I was enjoying my life as much as possible. But then out of nowhere, again, I got hit by this massive fear of, oh, there's something wrong with me. Oh, there's this horrible disease that will kill me slowly. That's the fear. And yeah, it felt like I started at zero again. I started doubting everything. I started body scanning and Googling things, of course, and yeah. Looking back at that time, I know that too much work, the stress, and all this uncertainty of the pandemic were a massive factor in why I fell back into that cycle. But yeah, man, it sucks. It sucks. Yeah, why am I telling you this? Why am I talking about anxiety when there are a bunch of other things out there? First of all, because it's so hard for me to talk about it and acknowledge it, even in front of people I love. So this is the first thing that I wanted to do to prove that it can be scary to talk about it, but it's also very good and necessary to talk about it. And also to bring more awareness to people that, anxiety disorder is nothing to be ashamed of. It's part of being human, and it can be treated. And you got this. If you are suffering, you got this. An anxiety disorder, untreated, can practically ruin your life. It can make you feel miserable all the time, and you don't experience any joy anymore. That is why I encourage you to seek help, to talk to people, to maybe try things like CBT, and just reduce stress overall, adapt a healthy lifestyle, eating healthy and clean. And I know those things all sound so mundane and typical, like everybody tells you that, but it actually makes a difference. And you can also take things. There's medication for it, even though I'm more an advocate for treating the root of the problem rather than like the symptoms. But there is good anxiety medication out there, and it's no shame to seek help. Lastly, I wanted to say that through my anxiety, I became more empathetic, creative, and overall just a better version of myself. I learned a lot of things about myself, and I still do, and I'm still struggling with it. Anxiety is, again, nothing that can be just treated away, just be gone. You are eventually as far that you manage the whole thing, that you manage the symptoms, and you know when and what to do if anxiety comes around. If you learn to accept anxiety, you will learn a lot about yourself and adapt the many tools to conquer anxiety in the future. And there will be bad days. The bad days come around even though you don't want to, or you don't want to believe it because you feel fine. But through events, through stressful situations, or even scrolling social media, you will have anxiety again. But it's manageable, and you will find a way to manage it. If I can do it, so can you. And I'm still here, and you're still here too.